Sothebys, the international auction house, is a global leader in luxury, offering artworks, watches, wine, and even real estate. As one of the only publicly listed auction houses in the world, what happens at Sothebys influences the entire art market. And lately, the company has doubled down on its South Asian art focus. I met with the Sothebys chairman to discuss this growing interest in South Asian art. Hello and welcome to Mojarto Conversations. I'm Anu Subramanian. Today I'm sitting down with Edward Gibbs. He's the Sothebys chairman of Indian and Islamic art. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Anu, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So are you familiar with Delhi?
I've been coming to Delhi for many years. My first visit was in 1985, can you believe that? And I've been a regular visitor. Fantastic to be back.
So was that a point at which your interest in Indian art grew?
Yes, I can trace it back to over 30 years ago. Really, my interest was piqued, sparked by that first visit, visiting the monuments of the city, particularly the Mughal period monuments, and that's been a lifetime's passion.
So tell me a little bit about how you've developed that passion and ultimately came into this position at Sothebys.
Well, it's a long journey. I've actually passed through several incarnations in my career. I think, yes, my interest was sparked by travel, then by study. I started in an auction house in 1986 as a trainee. I was cataloguing European porcelain. I spent 2 years cataloguing those little figurines, Meissen figurines with an enamel paint. Right. And after 2 years of sitting in a basement cataloguing these little figures, I just wanted to break their little heads off. So I decided to change direction, and through travel, through study, I gravitated to India. I became a lecturer at London University, School of Oriental and African Studies, and in 2003 I was approached by Sothebys and asked to head up the Middle East and India wing, and I gladly accepted.
Oh, and how has it changed over these years?
Our business has become much more global. These markets have developed beyond recognition. Modern and contemporary has become much more important to our business, and that's reflected in our auction sales. My specialization is the pre-modern period, so classical Indian art, sculpture, miniature painting, etc. But along the way, because part of my brief is to oversee the contemporary sales as well, so I've also had to study that area. But there are many connections between the two, and it's those commonalities, those connections that interest me, where artists refer back to the past traditions, and also the receptiveness to influence from outside. And that's something that you find in India. I think the way India absorbs outside influences, that's reflected in the art, architecture, religion and politics, but India always remains true to itself.
Walk me through that time period when you first started. Were people mostly looking at classical works then, or were they interested in modern masters even at that time?
Yes, certainly when I took over at Sothebys in late 90s, early 2000s, most of our sale total, the sort of volume of sales, was in classical Indian art, sculpture and miniature paintings. It's about 20 years ago now, you see the growth of interest in contemporary and an exponential rise in the value. And now the percentage of sales is certainly weighted towards the contemporary field.
So who drove that interest in contemporary art? Was it Indians abroad or at home?
Initially, there were two great collectors, the Horovitz family, husband and wife, and Mr. Masunora, who is a Japanese collector. So it was outsiders initially. But of course, many Indians also collected, but in a quiet way. But contemporary art became fashionable in, I would say, around 2000, about that period, late 90s, around 2000. And you see that from that point onwards, you see a growth in commercial galleries, you see the rise of the art fair, international auctions, Indian artists represented on an international platform in London and New York, Paris, etc. That's where we are today.
So that 2007-2008 period really was a boom for Indian art, but it has dipped and then plateaued ever since. What do you think contributed to that boom, and where have those buyers gone since?
I think initially there was huge excitement around this collecting field, and that saw a sort of tsunami of growth initially. And there was, you could describe it as a correction or normalization of growth in 2008. And since then we've seen a rise in interest in the modern period. You know, collectors have, as they sort of mature in their tastes, in their interests, they look back, they want to sort of deepen, broaden their collection. And we tend to see that whilst collectors will start with contemporary, they then tend to sort of move back in time to the modern period. And now we see contemporary collectors actually looking at classical Indian miniature painting, which in my mind, you know, is one of the great riches of India and represents extraordinary value for money, because for actually very, very small sums, you can acquire outstanding works of art.
So you're saying that buyers today will sort of come in through the gate with contemporary, but then they find themselves equating with much more classical and ancient works. Do you find that they kind of end up sticking then with Indian art, or as they continue to be collectors and mature, do they also look outside India's borders?
Each collector has his own personal journey.
But as a trend?
As a trend, yes, we can see that not just in India, but in other areas, in China, in Iran, with Iranian collectors, in Russia as well. Collectors will start in their national category, contemporary, and then they move back in time. And then they might transition into the international market and start looking at European art, American art, etc. Collecting is, it's both an affliction and an obsession, and it can become addictive. And at Sothebys, we're all extremely passionate about what we do. Many of us are collectors ourselves, and you know, we understand the passion that our clients have.
Now, Sothebys opened an office in Mumbai in October of 2016. What are your plans with that?
You mentioned the office. We have an office in the Taj Mahal Palace in Mumbai. We've recently appointed Gaurav Bhatia, who's come from the luxury and lifestyle sector, and he will be our managing director, is our managing director now in India. We're also hiring specialist staff to help on the ground. We're holding traveling exhibitions. We bring highlights from London and from New York. We showcase them here. We also have educational initiatives. You see our sister company, Sothebys Institute, is here. We're also doing private sales. But we're here really to introduce our clients to the world of Sothebys.
Tell me a little bit about actually what it's like to be at an auction.
The auction is a piece of theatre. It is like going to the theatre or the opera, except you don't have to buy a ticket. You can just show up. There's a great buzz. You feel the sort of tension, the excitement growing in the room. There's a sort of murmur initially of people coming into the room. Then the auctioneer gets up on the rostrum and he announces the beginning of the auction, and the room falls silent. There's a bank of telephones with Sotheby's employees speaking to clients who want to bid over the telephone. There's the internet connected to the auction because you can bid online. We've seen in our sales, we see things selling for multiples of their pre-sale estimate. On one occasion, I saw a piece that I'd valued at £10,000 make £1 million. So you can imagine the astonishment, the excitement in the room when that happens. And you hear gasps in the audience as another increment is added to the total. Finally, the hammer comes down, and often the room will erupt in spontaneous applause. And that is the theatre and the excitement of auction.
Very interesting. Well, we will get more into the future of auctions when we get back from the break. Don't go anywhere. Mojarto Conversations will be right back.